Welcome to the Real Faith Podcast with me, your host, Chris Goins, a podcast featuring real talk with real people about God, theology, and life. Our goal, authentic, vulnerable, and raw conversations on a variety of topics with a view towards looking at what God's Word has to say. These conversations will help you apply your faith in God's Word to the real challenges of life. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to the Real Faith Podcast. It's so good to have you along. And if you're viewing, you will note that the room has significantly improved because usually this room is filled with lots of testosterone. We've got the testosterone present. We've got Miller producing this podcast, his assistant, Kendall Clark, even got Nathan DeBoer in the room today. But I am blessed by the presence of my lovely wife, Janet, and Kevin Johnson's wife, Shannon.
Yes. Hey there.
Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you.
Welcome, Janet.
Thank you.
I am so honored to have you. And I might say, you guys told me, at least Janet said this in the pre-preparation show, that she was nervous about this. I've got to say that I'm really nervous because we've not rehearsed your answers. I'm uncertain of what you're going to say, and we're going to talk about marriage.
It could get interesting for you.
Yeah. So if you've not listened to last week's podcast, it was on headlines, and the headlines we examined was this headline from the Washington Post. If Bill and Melinda Gates can't make a marriage work, what hope is there for the rest of us? So last week, Kevin Johnson and I, your husband and I, talked a lot about marriage, and we unpacked so many things. And I believe it's a valuable podcast that would merit a listen.
Oh, yeah.
I would encourage you to start with that because in many ways, we're going to be responding to and reacting to what Kevin and I talked about, but it will be fresh material, same headline. Time magazine wrote the following regarding the Gates divorce. To the wider world, Bill and Melinda Gates have always appeared to be the Mazda of married couples. Not very glamorous, but very reliable and unlikely to break down. So when they announced that after 27 years, they, quote, no longer believe they can grow together, was the quote, and were divorcing, almost everyone was stunned. The article continues, what happened? If the Gates, with all that money, a joint project that had made a real impact in the world, talking about their philanthropic project, 3 kids and 27 years under their belt, if they couldn't make it, what hope is there for the rest of us? And when I first saw that headline, I don't know the Gates. Obviously, I've never been in the same room, never met them at all. And I want to make it clear that as we enter this discussion, this is not an opportunity to throw stones at the Gates family. In fact, I feel great compassion for them. This is also not an opportunity for us to throw stones at those who've experienced the pain or trauma of divorce. I have 3 brothers, and all 3 of them have lived through the trauma of a divorce. One of my brothers came to live with Jen and myself as he was experiencing the initial phase of that divorce. Our church, A2 Church, is filled with people who've experienced the trauma of divorce. So we'll talk about what God might want to say to those who've experienced divorce. But let me just ask you your initial thoughts on that statement by Time, those questions by Time. What happened if the Gates, with all that money, a joint project that had made an impact, 3 kids and 27 years under their belt, if they couldn't make it, what hope is there for the rest of us? How would either of you like to respond?
It's a big question. Janet, do you care if I just jump right in
go
real
right
quick?
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Janet and I were having coffee, we couldn't get like a word in edgewise. So just know that happens. But we'll take cues from each other this morning.
That's good.
My first thought is, again, big question, big thought. But and you're right. We don't look at them to judge them or to throw stones at them, but they're a really interesting example because they didn't have a lot of the outside stresses that a lot of people have. If let's take Christ out of that, which again, you're looking at a secular couple who has all the money, they have all the resources, they have a successful family, they have successful jobs. So the things that would typically stress a marriage, they didn't have. So if they decide, we just can't grow together, we've come to a place where we just can't grow, that to me is overwhelming in itself. And that when did that become the deciding factor of we just are going to part?
Yeah.
Because we just can't grow together anymore. Like, what happened and what made them decide they weren't going to put forth that extra effort to continue this life? They had decades together. They have this family, and the value of that in itself, to let that go is heartbreaking to me. Because as a Christian who is involved in a marriage, and you've said, I think before in your other show, Kevin and I have this year 30 years together. That's 3 decades of growing and changing. And I promise you, there have been years where I didn't see how we were going to grow together because of life stresses or being overwhelmed, or sometimes individually where I was with God at the moment. I mean, there are so many deciding factors, but that's when that relationship is so different. It's a covenant, not just an agreement. And even when you don't feel like it, you stay. You learn to grow. You have to rearrange. You have to become less selfish. And you have to make changes so you can figure out how to grow together. That's what struck me the most, I think, is just the deciding we just can't grow together anymore, so we're going to part.
Yeah, I mean, a couple, it doesn't happen year 27, all of a sudden we stopped growing.
Right.
At some point, there is an easing off in the pursuit of growth. So I want to ask both of you, when it comes to growing a marriage, growing as a husband and wife, what are some practices we can implement to make certain we don't reach that point where things have become static and stagnant and we simply are not growing? What are some habits, practices, things that come to your mind we can do to avoid that?
I would kind of like to piggyback on Shannon for just a minute, because, you think about the wealth, the money, the material things, all the things that they had that a lot of married couples don't have.
Right.
And you think about what was underlying in that first year, that 5th year, that 10th year
That's right.
of marriage that kind of was let go because you're busy. You're busy, building a business, raising children, buying your first home, and just all of those things, paying the bills. And it maybe just goes back to, first of all, we know money isn't everything. And there's really no value in money when it comes to relationships.
Right.
It's a great byproduct. It's of hard work and effort, and sometimes just the luck of the draw, But I think sometimes it just goes back to, we've kind of let things go. And that lack of communication, just because we're so busy, we're in the thick of things, especially child rearing, and here they are, is it their last daughter that just graduated?
Yes.
And now they're moving on. So I think really communication is such a big factor in marriage and in everything.
Well, you said so much there. I want us to unpack some of what you just said. You talked about the fact that materialism doesn't equate to successful relationships. You talked about the importance of communication, that's critical. You talked about the stress and strain of raising children, that sometimes married couples just get lost in all the busyness and the demands of raising children. Is that sort of what you're hinting at?
Yes. And also, it's not it's not just stressful and the strain of raising kids. It's so much joy and excitement, and you're busy. And, we see our grandkids, Jack and Lucy, and now Rosie, and with Jack especially, it's a constant adventure. Every day you're waking up and it's a new adventure. Like Chelsea sent us a picture this morning and we're like, what are y'all doing? And they're already on their adventure, which starts usually around 6 a.m. for Jack.
Oh, no.
And I think it's not only strain and the pressure of it, it's the joy and the excitement of it, but you just don't stop. You wake up in the morning, let's go, and you collapse in bed at night.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about that more, both Janet and Shannon.
That's good.
Because watching our children raise 3 children, I mean, you'll remember this, Janet, when because we had Jack and we had Lucy, and you and I as grandparents were already so busy. And one night our children told us, "Oh, we're pregnant again."
Yeah.
And we of course celebrated with them. And then when we got in the car, Janet looked at me.
Chris gets in the car.
Yes. I looked at Janet and said, "I'm already tired." Because keeping up with 2.
Gigi and Papa are going to have to get busy.
Well, we get to be involved. And when our kids were little, we didn't have our parents close by. We were in Birmingham or South Florida, and they lived in Tennessee. So it was always a treat, but we actually get to be in the day-to-day life of our grandchildren.
But I will say, I mean, I look at what Chelsea and Cody do because they're so committed to being great parents. They're committed to a variety of things, like they limit TV time, so you'll rarely walk into their home and their kids be watching something. They want the kids to be outside doing things, doing projects. And after sometimes spending hours with them, I'm wondering, how do they have any energy left? I mean...
But that's the question, Chris. I mean, like everything that Janet unpacked in that statement, those are stresses that in those early years of being married, they can either pull you together or they can pull you apart because you are so tired. That's when you have to be so intentional. It's the investing and the constant investing and evaluating through what you said earlier, Janet. Communication is going to be key so that you don't wake up 27 years later and think, I don't know how I can grow with this person.
Yeah.
Like the wise thing would be to do when you're having all that joy and you are going on adventures with your kids, maybe a mental checklist for us as the spouse part, the husband and wife part is, when's the last time I went on an adventure with my spouse?
Yes,
like I love creating these adventures for my kids, but man, I got to make sure that I'm adventuring as much, if not more, with my spouse, because it's so fun, and you feel like like you have to make the kids number one. And I remember talking to many young moms, and y'all, and I was there too, like in my early 20s. Yeah. I remember at one point thinking, and this is, horrible to say, but I think a lot of women can understand, Kevin's just going to have to wait because this child can't do anything for themselves. So he has to be first. I have to do this. I have to choose this because it felt maternal. It felt like the right thing to do. To be a good mom, I've got to give you 100%. And then when things were stressful for us, and through a mentor's help, it was like, oh, wait a minute. So that's not my first earthly relationship priority.
Wow.
I need to be making sure that, one, I'm spending time with God, but that I am giving my husband the attention that he deserves so that he feels respected, honored, and valued. Yes. Because that investment that you make early on is, and Janet, you and I have had these conversations, it's what's going to help you when you wake up 27 years later and your kids are going and you don't feel like, I don't think I can grow with that person. Right. Wow. Because you've been excited and you've probably, if you've been investing, you're now ready for that next adventure. Yes. And it's like, we're going to have a blast, just like you are with your grandkids. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're enjoying that season, and that's the investment that's worth it. Yes. Like, wait for the payoff. Do the investing and do the hard work in your marriage. So when it comes to this time that you're in, that we're in, it's just the most beautiful, sweetest season ever. Not perfect, because you still have to work, but it's sweet.
That's good, Shannon. But I'm sorry, but when you're taking off on a flight, they always tell you put the oxygen mask on first.
That's good.
So you can take care of those beside you. So it's the same with marriage. Take care of your don't ignore your children, of course,
right?
But make sure that, like you said, you're investing, you're building that foundation early on in your marriage.
That's awesome. Let's talk a bit about, Shannon talked about this, hinted at it, and we've talked about it. One article that I read indicated that the reason for this divorce, that it had been some time coming, but the reason was that their youngest daughter just turned 18, is moving out of the house. So with the empty nest, they felt more freedom to proceed with something that had evidently been in their hearts for a while.
Right.
This has been called the Emptiness Syndrome, and it's occurring more and more. Used to, most divorces occurred in the early years of marriage, but it's interesting that there's been an uptick in those over the age of 50 who've been married light the gates for a few decades now, also moving towards divorce. What are some things we can do? And you've already hinted at some of these things. Please feel free to even rehearse things that you've already said. What are some things we can do to avoid that emptiness syndrome, to being lost when the kids move out and on?
I mean, again, I don't think we can say it too many times because it's important, and sometimes we are very stubborn people and we need to hear things over and over again. But the communication is going to be key, to talk about things, to have times when you regularly connect with your spouse, and then to have some self, look at yourself, self-evaluate. Are you being the kind of spouse that you need to be? I feel like we have to evaluate ourselves regularly too, because there are times that I get really selfish, and if I'm not being the type of wife that I need to be to Kevin, it's not going to help us continue to grow. So I think you have to have that that in your marriage as well. Wow. And then I think you've got to find things to do together that you enjoy. I mean, Kevin and I are completely different people. I don't love every single thing he does, but is it important to me, or is it important to him that I take interest in what he does, even if I find it not so interesting all the time? Yes, it is. I need to show him that I'm interested, and not just to be fake about it, but just to really find something that we can enjoy together, and that's through conversation and through exploring. We love road trips. We love going places. We love dreaming about where we're going to go. I do believe that if you ever find that you are in a season of your marriage where you're no longer dreaming together, then there's a little part of that marriage that's dying, that is just losing some of what it could be, what makes it so special and wonderful, and again, makes it just one of your favorite relationships in your life, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's powerful.
That's very good.
Any thoughts from you?
I just love what she said about dreaming together. When you lose that, and there are times when you do.
Right.
We even talked out in the foyer about Chris and I will be celebrating 38 years of marriage, and you and Kevin 30.
Yep.
And you have that cycle, and you've experienced so many things through those years, and you dream together, but then you get busy and you lose it, and it comes back, and when it does, it is like a revival for your soul,
right?
That you can do that again.
Right.
Oh my goodness, we've forgotten the home that we talked about years ago.
That's right.
Now we're at a place where we're almost there.
Right.
We could do that. We could actually, or travel more. We can actually make that happen.
Right.
So I think that's a huge one.
And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you if you find yourself in one of those places to where you're like, oh, wait, we're in roommate syndrome, or oh, wait, we're, not clicking on all cylinders. I think that's a very healthy thing when you can step back and say, okay, we need to recalibrate here because we've been really busy, and life is good and life is great and life is busy. but when it gets you off track, you need to know when you can pull things back in.
Yeah.
Like I've had to tell Kevin, and I know he shared some of this with you on your podcast last week, but what was funny is what he didn't say is the backstory, and I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but I feel some freedom now that he's not here. I can say it. He mentioned that I had to tell him when it was time, to for a romantic night out or whatever. And y'all, he is an amazing husband. He's great. I'm not complaining. But every now and then, I like some, romance, like nice restaurant, whatever.
Yes.
Just be super romantic. And I'm not high maintenance. Don't require it all the time. But he had said, or we had one night where it was like, hey, we're going to have a work night on Wednesday night. And so that's what we were going to do. And so it's Monday, okay? And he's like, we're going to have a work night Wednesday night on the house. This is blah, 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 finish this project. Great. So Tuesday, he comes in and he's like, hey, I think we need to have a date night Wednesday night. And I'm like, I thought we were doing work night, but yes, I love date night. So I'm so excited. Y'all, I come home and I get ready. Like, I am now dressed because date night, I'm like, I'm going to Gianmarco's, maybe Trey Luna. I don't know. I don't even care. It's date night. And so he comes in the room and he's like, wow, that's dressy. And I said, what's date night? He said, I thought we'd go to Baja Burger on the way to Lowe's. Y'all, the look on my face. And I said, what? And he said, you like Baja Burger?
That
I
sounds
said,
like
hilarious.
me. Oh, my goodness.
I'm like, not on date night. And then he said, well, no, I thought we could kill two birds with one stone. And then he stops. He goes, shouldn't have said that. And I'm like, not on date night. And I said, I'm changing my clothes. And so we went to Lowe's. I pouted maybe for 30 minutes, but I got over it and we were fine. And then he came back and said, I'm really sorry. I'm like, it's okay. I said, you need to know I need a proper date night soon. Like that is not mine. But again, it's the communicating. Like I could have just been frustrated and mad.
Yeah.
And that's what we tend to do sometimes is when we want you guys to figure it all out.
Yeah.
But y'all, he's so busy and he's a little distracted at times. We all know this about him. If you know him, you love him for those things too. But it's my responsibility in the communication to make him aware because he loves me and I know that he doesn't mean to not think of those things.
Wow.
It's okay that I have to say, hey, I'd really like this soon.
Wow.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So there are marriages, and I have friends who say, he just needs to think of it. Well, you're going to get more mad and disappointed if you don't ever express that to your spouse, and that's not fair either. That's like playing a very unfair game with somebody because you love each other. So help each other be each other's best.
Yes. Well, that's such good counsel.
Very
Anything
unfair.
you want to add?
Well, it's like she said, it's very unfair to assume that your husband or your spouse, even for the husband, to assume that we as wives can read into
That's
what
right.
they want.
That's right.
So it goes back to communication.
Tell us the expectation.
Yeah.
That's really, that's big. What's expected?
Yeah.
Even sometimes through weekends or trips, tell me what's expected because sometimes Kevin and I cannot be on the same page about what we think this time is going to be at the house. And now he's very much, tell me what's going on this weekend.
Yeah.
What are we doing or
That's
what's
so good.
expected.
And also, I think setting up, I don't know the best way to say this, but setting up a safe place to be able to speak your mind.
Yes.
And not get offended or sensitive if your spouse says something
That's
that
right.
you don't like.
Right.
Or that you fell short of.
Right.
And now you're insecure about it or something
Right.
like that. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I was like, I really admire how honest you guys are with each other, and they don't take offense.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry about that. Let's do that.
Right.
and
That's real
just
trust.
watching. Yes,
That's good.
Trust.
Yes.
That's huge.
That's good.
Jordan Peterson, in his new book, Beyond Order, has a rule number 3, do not hide unwanted things in the fog. And it is all about what you guys have just said. If there's something there, even if it's little, don't let it sit there.
Yes.
Go ahead, bring it out into the open, discuss it, deal with the issue, you'll be better. And what I hear both of you saying is clarity and communication is critical. I don't want to miss something before we move on. And Chris, if you can, kind of signal to me time frame because we like to keep these at a certain length, and I don't know how long we've been going. I forgot to look at my watch. But Shannon, you and Kevin really have a commitment to taking adventures. Let me use that word since we're stuck on that for a moment. You regularly, you just took an adventure recently.
Right.
And you're regularly thinking about that. Part of it's probably because you're in the hospitality industry.
Oh, yeah, employee discounts are great.
Talk about the importance, though, of planning things. Let's also talk to those couples who may not have as much discretionary income available to them at this stage in their life. I mean, really young families, that tends to be a reality. How can they keep something going in their life so they're constantly doing things together?
Oh, you don't have to spend a lot of money to travel. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you can do that are local or, regionally, whatever that looks like. But the important thing is to be present with your person for a significant number of days or a day or whatever that looks like. Zach, when he was sharing from the stage this past weekend, he talked about one of the things that kills people, and he held up a cell phone. It keeps you from being present.
Yeah.
And for us, when we leave, when we travel, when we fly somewhere or drive somewhere, it pulls us out of our home, which we feel like sometimes you feel like you have to be working on it. You need to be doing some chores. You maybe need to take care of somebody or run something. When you leave an area, you're just with each other, and it's just new, and you get to enjoy some things there. That's what we love. If you don't have the money to go do that, then go take a drive, go to a state park, do a hike, spend some time to where you're turning that cell phone off. I feel as many challenges as we had in the early 90s when we got married, my son and his wife now have almost even more challenges because you always have these phones. Yeah. You've got way too much information. You've got way too much comparison. You have way too much distraction. Yeah. So you have all of that in your pocket, and you feel the need to pull it out and look at all that distraction and comparison every 30 minutes to an hour. Yeah. That's and good. I feel like as couples, what is that time that you are going to protect to where you turn that off and just be with each other? And our trips are, I love social media much more than Kevin does, so I love to post pictures and do fun things like that. But my commitment to him on our trip is that's not out all the time. I'll pull it out or whatever, and I always tell him what's going on. Or sometimes I'll say, hey, guess what? He's like, is it on Facebook? I'm like, oh, it might be. He's like, I don't care about that right now. But anyway, just get away. Just be intentional.
Yeah. Anything
That's so
you
good.
Want to add, Sue?
I agree with that. I always think about our Europe trip about, what was it, 4 years ago? 4.5 years ago.
Something of that nature, yeah.
And we made the commitment to each other to keep our phones away.
That's good.
I didn't even take my phone with me when we would leave the hotel. And we made the commitment that we would keep our phones away during the day, take pictures and all of that, but we wouldn't post to social media even until after our trip. And it was like a 10-day trip, I think. Yeah. And we didn't post anything until we got back to the States.
Because we didn't want that interruption of interaction.
That's good.
Right, the engagement from
placed
people on
value
social
on it. That's good.
And we would only text our family. We have a family text. And we would only text them at night when we got back to the hotel. Just, hey, here's what happened. How's everybody doing?
That's good.
And it was great. Yeah. Really great.
So avoid distraction, avoid comparison, and just be intentional. Let's move forward. And guys, give me a signal when we've got like 15 minutes left so I'll know. I want to read this portion because I think it could be helpful. In court documents, the philanthropist, Melinda Gates, said her marriage was irretrievably broken. Boy, those words they hit me with a ton of bricks. Irretrievably broken. What are some things that can break a marriage, and how can we avoid getting to that point where we would describe our marriage as irretrievably broken? Thoughts? Very deep question, very tough one.
The first thing I think about is infidelity. That is, whether it's a Christian marriage or a secular marriage, that is that can crush the heart of a marriage, obviously.
Yes.
And there are a lot of stories where God has redeemed and restored, and people walked that road, which I'm sure was not easy. But there are a lot of stories where there are women and men who that was crushing for them, and they couldn't come back after that. So that, to me, would be one thing that would be incredibly hard to get over. Or, other types of breaking of trust.
Yeah.
So lying to, and when it becomes a habit.
Like a pattern, like if you
Yes.
don't know that person and they've totally just have not shown you their true self. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, sweetheart, that irretrievably breaks a marriage?
I mean, I think what Shannon said was, I don't think I could expand on that.
So let me cover. She talked about infidelity, and by the way, infidelity can go beyond the scope of physical infidelity. It often begins. Most office affairs begin with emotional infidelity,
Right.
and where there's a trust built, communication given. I have often challenged young couples. There are certain things we should never talk about with anyone other than our spouse. For instance, I believe that our sex life,
Right.
that belongs to me and Janet. For me to ever talk about disparity in that, lack in that, lack of connection with anybody other than a gifted, trained, professional Christian counselor, I feel like is damaging to our marriage. And I also believe unintentionally, most affairs, this is statistics, most affairs don't occur between people and strangers. They occur between people and close friends.
Right.
And I often think it starts when things are communicated that should be ours. To me, there's a level of intimacy in that aspect of marriage that belongs to you and your spouse. If there are problems, seek professional help. And I would also go sexual sin that can't neatly fit into
Right.
that area of infidelity.
Right.
It's a growing question. Pornography, I believe, is always damaging. Whether you're married or not,
Right.
it devastates and damages. And then I believe truth-telling, lies, deceit, it undermines the stability. So those are a few things. And I would add once more, I'm not saying once this occurs, it irretrievably breaks a
Right.
marriage. But when it's repeated and repeated, it often places stress fractures in a marriage that just can't heal.
Right.
Let's move to some more fun topics. that one, I felt the weight of it right after I asked it, and then we'll also be moving towards a time of closure. What is it? I'm asking this with a smile. What is it that husbands sometimes just don't get when it comes to marriage and family? What do you wish men knew about marriage and about being married? Come on, let us know. So, speak.
I'm laughing just watching the two of you. Like, it's funny being here with the two of you. So, okay, Janet, what is
Janet,
it?
please let me know, along with our wide podcast listening audience.
Exactly. I mean, there's so, it sounds funny, but there's so much that, it's hard to say, to pick that one or
really
two
is.
things. But, it's almost like I want you to know that it's ever changing. Like, I could tell you one thing today and it's going to be different, in
is
30
so
days,
good.
because
This
we
is
are
a
so
moving target.
emotional.
Yeah.
Yes, and God wired us that way. That's what we want you to know, that you'll never have us really figured out. Because one day we're going to be fine with Baja Burger and the next we're
That's
not.
right.
But, that's why you love us. But just to be gentle with us when we are so emotional some days. Some days we are just emotional creatures. And some days, something I wish that I could have told Kevin early on is before we fought about this so much is some days I just want you to listen to me and not fix it. Like, just let me talk, because I'm this emotional person and I just need to go through my day. And even though it may be really crazy, I still don't want you to fix it or give me a solution. And he would say, you just want me to listen? Yes. I just need you to listen. And that's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know.
I think that's one of the biggest things for us too, is when, and this is supposed to be fun, but I feel like I'm emotional. But listening is huge.
Right.
You know, and when we have emotions, it's okay.
Right.
We're okay.
We're okay.
We're going to be okay.
Right.
You know, in a couple of hours when we've cried our eyes
Yes.
out.
Wow.
You know, that was such a good thing for us.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
And it's also good. I mean, I know it's what do you want? What do we want husbands to know? But I think wives need to know it's okay. Husbands feel very deeply.
Right.
And they want to fix things because they care so much.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
And so he does. You do want to fix things.
Right.
Because you care.
Right.
And you want it, let's get it right. Let's make this work. But sometimes the best thing is just to process it.
Yeah.
You know, to process. It's just, it's the journey of that next 2 hours or maybe that whole entire day.
Yeah.
Where we need to
Janet,
just
that's so good.
be alone.
Right.
You know?
We need that. And it doesn't mean that we don't love you or don't need
exactly.
you. We just need that time to process.
Yes. And there's times when I just need to leave. I need to go get my Starbucks coffee.
Yep.
And I need to pull into a parking lot
Right.
where no one else is.
Right.
You know, and
And
if
we're
it's
not
just,
leaving you forever.
Yeah, in the quiet.
God.
That's right, just for the day, because I need the moment.
Exactly.
You know,
that's so good, because I think it's hard sometimes to not feel rejection or whatever in those moments, but it really is. We just need a moment.
Yeah.
Especially as women, we're caretakers, and that's a moment of self-care when we say, I need to pull myself out for a moment.
Yep.
Well, that's so good. It's so helpful to me. For the podcast listening audience, it's obvious I'm often a talker. And I have learned today, you must listen, Chris.
That's awesome.
Shut up. Oh, good word. Good word. Hey, let's talk to single people in the audience. There are some singles who feel called to singleness, and we champion that person who feels called to singleness. And I do not want to create a culture at A2 Church where there's this pressure on them to get married. I rarely ask people about their status in life. However, there are other singles who do live with the hope, desire, expectation, dream that they will one day be married. What are some things a single man or woman, either, can do right now if they desire at some point in the future to be married? What are some things they can do right now to prepare themselves for that so that they have a good, thriving marriage?
I think, if I can go first, I think first of all, throw off everyone's expectations.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a Southern cultural thing or if it's just everywhere, but once you get old enough to, quote, have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it's like, oh my goodness, who are you dating? Who's your boyfriend? What's your girlfriend's name? You know, and then when they get engaged or they start dating someone a long time, when you're going to get engaged, when you're going to and then they get married and it's like, when you're going to have a baby.
Yes.
And for single, and it just never stops. I mean, I feel so badly sometimes for our graduating seniors because probably starting in high school, maybe middle school, the pressure of where are you going to go to college? What do you want to do with your life? Who knows?
Right.
I mean, I'm 54.
Right.
I'm doing something that I've never done before with real estate. And it's like, it's phenomenal. So you're always going to be doing something.
Yeah.
And I think for singles, they need to enjoy the moment, enjoy life. And don't let those expectations drive your fear or drive your insecurity to make you think that you're not worthy enough to get married. You're not worthy enough for a relationship. You're shamed if you don't. You're none of those things. Yeah. God finds value in your marriage, in your singleness, wherever you are in life, wherever we are. He finds value, so much value and worth in us. And just to sit there and rest in that and be at peace in that
Yeah.
and,
That's good.
and enjoy that and have those things that you can do now while you're single that you can't do when you get married.
That's right.
So, and just enjoy life.
Yeah.
Throw off the expectations of other people. Don't let them define
That's
where
right.
you are or where you're going.
Boy,
That's
that is
good.
so good.
That's
Any
so
thoughts
good.
from you, Shannon?
No, I think Janet, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's just it. Don't wait. Just enjoy where you are.
Yeah.
And be whole in that
Yes.
moment, you and God, and see
Amen.
where that takes you.
Yeah.
Well, let me see what else we can talk about before our time is expired. Let's do this. Let's talk briefly to those in our listening audience who've experienced the pain, the trauma of divorce. Because the church historically has been very, very unkind to those who've experienced the trauma of divorce. We all know the value of marriage, and even divorced people would tell you, I know what God has said in His Word
Right.
about divorce. I'm not unclear. Let me just ask, how can a divorced person reconnect with the church if somehow they felt as if the church has rejected them due to their divorce? And also, how can they find hope to live again? Maybe, and I don't want to assume this about every divorced person that they would want this, but maybe to love again if that's something they want to pursue. Let's just talk about healing ministry and helping in the reconnection of someone who's experienced the trauma of divorce back with the church, particularly if a church dinged them somehow in the pain of what they went through.
You know, that's hard, Chris, because the church, you know, I mean, I have to believe that the church means well. The church means to love and to help people grow in the way that they should toward Christ. But there are so many people who felt after divorces or whatever that they couldn't go back to church, and that tells me something's wrong somewhere. Not that we have a perfect church. I like to think that we are a perfect church for imperfect people because we we love so
like
big. But I pray that our church is the kind that welcomes everyone who, you know, whether you've been divorced or whatever your struggle is, that you will find grace and love and acceptance here. I think sometimes, in all honesty, when people wrestle with going back to church after they've been divorced, you know, I would question, is it really, do you feel kind of not accepted by that church, or are you still healing? You know, because sometimes we have to take every thought captive too, because there's
Well,
a
that's a good
lot
word.
that
That's
Satan
very
will
good.
say to us, like, you know, they don't want you there. You shouldn't go there. You know, spend some time with the Lord and be real clear on who those thoughts are coming from. Because, you know, the truth is, you know, the Lord, I mean, He forgives us, and then He moves on with us, and He doesn't want us to hold anything over our heads at all. And a lot of people too, getting out of marriages, I mean, who knows what the circumstance was. Don't let Satan play a bigger part of that in your head. Don't give him that real estate in your head.
That's right.
And just
That's
when you
good.
walk into somewhere, it's just know that you are loved.
Yeah.
Amen. Any thoughts from you, sweetheart?
I would say a couple of things. Find your tribe.
Yeah.
Find your people.
Yep.
And I think that's just so important to find a circle of people that believe in you no matter
That's
what.
right.
They're not judging you. They love you for who you are,
Yep.
not for something that was done to you or something
Right.
that you did, but they love you
That's
for who
good.
you are. And they want to bring you back to a place of wholeness
Yep.
and healing. Second thing is find a therapist, find
Yeah.
a great Christian counselor who, and that takes work.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody out there is great.
Right.
And I mean, I've done that personally myself. Sometimes it's not marital counseling.
Right.
Sometimes it's work you have to do on yourself.
That's right.
And I found myself, Chris knows, at a very dark place in my life at the end of the year. And sorry,
Yeah.
finding that has
Yeah.
been huge. And he didn't even know till a couple of months ago
Yeah.
that I had been going to someone. But, you know, Bob Goff says in his book, Dream Big, which I love this book, that self-awareness,
Yeah.
it's gold.
Yeah, it is.
It's gold. And if you can be self-aware enough to say, okay, it's not all about my spouse
Right.
or, circumstances that surround me, but what is it in me? Maybe there's something with me.
Right.
And maybe there's not.
Right.
But you don't ever know that until you dig deep.
That's
and
right.
like you said, Shannon, we're imperfect people.
Right.
And God loves us so much. And then find a coach or a mentor. I've done all three of those things
Right.
in the past 9 months.
Right.
And it has been incredible.
Right.
And I feel like I'm stronger. I'm in a better place because of that. And I feel like we're even better
Right.
because of that.
Janet, but what you just said is the key to all that. Do not, you found people. You knew that you needed to talk to somebody for the investment of your marriage, for yourself, and for your family.
Yes.
And it's when we don't talk to people, that is when Satan just fills our head with so much, literally. And we don't talk a lot about that, but there is a war for our mind every single day.
Yes.
And it's either
Absolutely.
the Lord or it's either Satan. I mean, let's just be honest. That's what it is. So who are you going to give that space to?
That's right.
And so when you feel any type of darkness, whatever that is, whether that be emotional or whatever, it's time to, all right, I'm going to talk to somebody
Yes.
and move forward.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Good one.
Great insight. I want to say a word to anyone who's experienced the trauma of divorce. You are more loved by God
Amen.
than you can possibly know.
Amen.
And God doesn't place a scarlet letter D on
Right.
you
Yeah.
when you experience that trauma, whether it's once, whether it's twice, whether it's multiple times.
Right.
God's grace is relentless in reaching out to us. So respond to that grace. Sometimes the church will blow it.
Yeah.
The church is filled with imperfect people, and imperfect people act imperfect. Sometimes the church will blow it. But there are many churches. I mean, I don't know every church, and I can't speak for every church, but I know the heart of this church. I know the heart of my brother's church.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the heart of, I'm thinking of a pastor friend who pastors right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I know his heart. And so many others, their heart is for you, not against you. And I would encourage you, if you felt, sometimes it's an interior shame, and I'm glad you talked about that principle from 2 Corinthians 10, taking every thought captive. Sometimes it's an interior shame, not just something exterior
Right.
foisted upon us. Sometimes there's a sense of shame that rises up that we have to work through.
Yeah.
And we have to realize this isn't them.
Right.
This is something I heard when I was a kid or at some point in my life. I'm going to work through that, and I'm going to get to community, to what you said, Janet, get to that tribe.
Yeah.
So please know you are so loved
Yeah.
Yeah.
by your Father, always and forever. Let me ask one more question, and then let's draw this up. Let's talk about being a working mom. And I think this will be really, really cool because for a number of years in your life, Janet, you got to be a stay-at-home mom. You've been a working mom with really young children, and then you were a stay-at-home mom. Shannon, I think most of your career, you've been a working mom.
Right.
And I think this is a really important question to have. Have you ever struggled, either of you, with finding balance, being a mom, working? Did you ever feel guilty? What did you do with that guilt? Dads rarely get asked, if ever. I don't know that I've ever heard the question asked about dad guilt. What do we do to relieve some of that pressure that unfortunately sometimes even the church creates for moms and mom guilt? Because my wife has been on both sides of that fence, we've never drawn hard lines about what we believe is a biblical stance in these regards.
Yeah.
We've been more open, but thoughts about this, balance. What would you say to moms who need to find that balance about guilt or shame that might exist regarding these questions? Either of you, feel free.
All right.
Shannon.
You want me to
By the
go
way,
first?
what would you say to affirm stay-at-home moms who feel, you got to do that. One of our children is doing that right now, and believes that's a calling for them. So look, I don't want anyone to be devalued in all of that conversation.
No. I mean, there's not a right or a wrong answer. I mean, it really is. Or what do you feel called for? Or some, for Kevin and I early on, it's not that necessarily I felt called to work. We just needed to pay the rent. So Mama had to go to work. But, there are different circumstances, but one is not better than the other. I think you have to feel what your heart wants to do as a mom, and if you want to stay home, and then pray that the Lord will eventually bless you financially to do that. I mean, that's great, but if He has not blessed you in that way, it's not terrible. You have to find a way to make it work. But Chris, I think that I didn't know. I was overwhelmed at times, when I was a working mom, but I didn't know how other people were doing it, so I didn't have anybody to compare it to. I do feel that now working mothers probably have a harder time because if you look on social media and you think everybody else's house is just so perfect because the moms are at home and they've got their play date groups and they've got this and that, it can leave you with a sense of, well, I obviously don't have it right, and I'm not doing it the right way. I think that's, again, how we have to be really, really careful not to compare our life with somebody else, because that will add even more stress and more guilt to what you think you're not providing for your children. Right. At the end of the day, if your children know that they are loved and cared for, and you are, investing in your spouse with whatever time that you have left over, you've got to quantify that then at that time. I feel like that's what you have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I was just talking to our oldest daughter, Chelsea, about this the other day. I remember my mom working all the time. She did not stay home. My dad worked 2 jobs. I remember that early on when but there was never a point when I didn't feel loved.
Right.
And I'm so thankful.
Yeah.
My mom and dad are like my best friends.
Yeah.
So they really provided a great foundation. There was a time, I think the more I got to middle school, my mom, was a hairstylist, and my dad built a shop on for her so she could be at home, and she was even talking about that the other day, I wish I didn't work so much, and I'm like, you can't have those regrets,
right?
You did the best you could, and you were a great mother,
right?
And when we got home from school, you were there,
right?
So it doesn't always work for everyone, and I think about all the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, the health, that are women and mothers, that make it work. And also, we're a partnership, husbands and wives. There's not one better than the other, or that's valued more than the other. So, I mean, I know women today, I have women very close to me who are the breadwinner.
Yeah.
And the husband's working like a side gig, or he's staying home to be the full-time caregiver. And that's beautiful too. So I think you're right, Shannon. I agree with you. It's not a right or wrong.
Right.
It's what works.
And that's what I think the heart of the answer to your question is. Just if you find yourself overwhelmed, I think you have to look at what you can start saying no to, because you are not meant to go through this life over. If you are constantly overwhelmed, then something needs to be changed.
Yes.
Yeah. And maybe you don't need to do all the activities, and maybe you don't need to do everything that you think you're supposed to do as a young family and a mom, but to give yourself some grace there, and it's not going to be perfect. And if cooking a well-balanced dinner every single night of the week is stressing you out, frozen pizza is not going to kill your kid one day. It's going to be okay. Like Chick-fil-A makes really good grilled nuggets. That'll make you feel a little bit better, and it's quick and easy.
Exactly.
So just give yourself a break.
Yes.
And give yourself some self-care.
So
this conversation has been so rich. My favorite book on marriage will not come as a surprise to most in this room or this podcast, because I've mentioned it several times. Tim Keller's The Meaning of Marriage. And what I love about that book is it's not filled with practicals, which tend to change over time.
Right.
It's filled with scripture. And when I say philosophy, I mean a philosophical foundation derived from scripture. So when he goes to answer that question, he doesn't give a clear answer. He does what you ladies have determined. This will look different for every couple. couples have to determine, because Scripture doesn't say it specifically. Couples have to determine what works for them, what calling God has placed upon them, and then walk that out. I think we get into trouble when we assume God's calling for us is God's calling for everyone else.
Right. It's right for me, so surely it must be right for you.
Right. A one size fits all.
Right.
And God's not like that. Let me just ask both of you, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you would like to discuss before we wrap this up? Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
If we had another hour, we could get into a lot of good conversation, but no. We'll save that for episode 12.
Yeah. Let me ask about this, Shannon. You and Kevin lead the More Marriage Ministry. You have a conference that was canceled last year due to COVID. But it's rescheduled for 2021.
So excited.
Let's give people dates. Let's let people know what they can do so they don't miss out on one of, I kid you not, and Jan and I have done a lot of conferences over a lot of years. This is a great conference.
Thank you.
Our church hosts it, but it is great.
Yeah. It is, Chris, we feel the same way. We've got such a great team, you guys, within the More Marriage Ministry. And we love planning this. We love, it's not just speakers, it's great music. There's lots of fun surprises through the weekend. But this year it's going to be October 15th and 16th. And it's going to be a Friday night and a Saturday that'll run through lunch. Each year we listen to the surveys of people to see how we could get better and do things a little different. We're going to be tweaking that a little bit based upon those. So I think that it won't be the same old thing. And if you've been here for the last couple of years, we took this offline as far as joining like a major nationwide, what do you call those? Where you
we
telecast.
Stopped simulcasting.
Yes, we stopped doing that.
And we started doing our own thing.
Yes, and I think that the people love it. So this year will be no different. So mark that off, a great date night, the 15th.
Let me ask, so people don't miss information.
Okay.
What do they need to do? Because right now there's not a way for them to register.
Right.
So what do they need to do so that when registration opens, they can get in for those best rates?
Right.
They can make certain they're a part of this.
So the best way to do it, like if you are an A2 family member, sign up on your sign-up connection card, and we'll be sure to keep in touch with you.
So if you're getting our A2 news, that weekly news, is there a place where they can follow More Marriage on social?
So if you go on social, we've got a Facebook group page. It is a private page, just ask to be a part of it. And the reason why we made it private is because we share a lot of church things on there, and we've shared a lot of stories. Not that we hide anything from anybody, but we wanted it to be for people who are within this ministry. So just request to be a part of it. We will let you in. It keeps all those people from like other countries who just want to hack us out too, by the way.
Yes.
So we don't know those people.
And prayerfully, if you will just subscribe to A2's newsletter, you'll get emails. And also if you'll subscribe, locate more. It's MORE with a plus sign.
With a plus sign. And we do have a mailing list. We've got emails that go out, and we have a quarterly newsletter now. Cool. So if they sign up, we'll be sure to get them that too.
So just email us if you're hearing this.
Yes.
info@a2.church.
Yes.
info@a2.church. Say, I'd like to sign up for the More Marriage Ministry newsletter, all communications, and we'll make certain you go on
and we'll
those
make sure
lists.
you know.
Yeah.
Hey, let me just say to both of you, first of all, my wife, it's so good to just talk to you in this setting because people don't often get this. So thank you. One of my wife, if you've ever heard her sing, she is one of my top 2 favorite singers of all time. She loves to sing. She hates doing this. So I know that her doing this is out of deep love for not only myself, but you, the audience.
Yeah.
And then Shannon, I just want to say to you, Janet and I thank God for you and Kevin. Your friendship makes us better. It's a sustaining force for us. You've been through a lot. I mean, we're celebrating, 13 years together as a church this coming November?
I don't know, Chris, is it?
Yeah, I think it is. I said that last year, and
exactly.
people said, no, Chris, you don't even know how old the church is. It's
But
12.
I love it.
Yeah. That's just like a man.
I think
the
we get
best.
to repeat.
Yes.
So you guys have been with us that whole
Right.
stint,
Yeah.
and
We love it.
love you.
Well, we love you
and
guys,
we
too.
thank God for you. So thank you all for joining us for the Real Faith Podcast. God bless, and we'll see you next time. This has been the Real Faith Podcast with Chris Goins. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.